Since the Trump regime and Pam Bondi are weaponizing this NSPM7 memo, I think they call it operationalizing this NSPM7 memo, where they're trying to label people who are anti-fascist or maybe criticize MAGA Christianity or say things that the regime thinks are un-American or anti-capitalist. They're trying to label all of those folks as domestic terrorists and put them on a watch list, scare and intimidate all of us into not criticizing the regime. And as long as I've been a very out and proud anti-capitalist for a couple of decades now, so I'm sure that myself and like 50% of America are on this watch list or will be very soon. And we should make it as many Americans as possible, right? Get everybody's name on that list so they can't possibly investigate all of us for simply exercising our protected constitutional rights. Anyway, as long as anti-capitalist sentiment is something that the regime is opposed to, I just thought I would take a moment here and talk about this recent report from Oxfam. I'm a huge fan of Oxfam. I'm a big supporter of theirs. I don't think that they get enough attention. They do tremendously good work. Their focus is on climate action, economic justice, humanitarian aid, and women's rights and gender justice. They also talk an awful lot about the super rich, the wealth gap, both in the United States and globally, the exploitation, the harm caused by the super rich and corporations. And for myself as a permaculturist whose ethics are earth care, people care, and fair share, there's no way that I could be in support of an exploitive capitalistic system where the goal is profit above all else, right? Profit above people, corporations, above community. And in a capitalist system, you're going to have exploitation because the goal is to post that profit for this quarter. It's not thinking about sustainability. It's not thinking about our quality of life. It's not thinking about protecting the environment. It's not thinking about caring for the earth or people at all. And it's definitely not about making sure we all have a fair share. However you want to define that. I could talk about that some more. I can talk about the controversial permaculture ethic of fair share, also called set limits to consumption. I could talk about that all day long. So if people want me to rant on that subject, expound on that subject, I am very happy to, because it's something very, very controversial in the US. It sounds like socialism to say that we should have fair share. We should have equitable distribution of resources, that we should set limits to consumption, that in a capitalistic society that is built on exploitation and hyper-consumption, having any kind of sentiment of like, maybe we don't need to be buying all this shit. Maybe our desire to consume and consume instead of to produce and regenerate and to share and give, like maybe that's not good for us. Maybe that's running our society into the ground. Well, in late stage capitalism, in a kleptocracy like we're living in now, where the super rich are exploiting all of us worse than ever, they are not only grifting off our labor and our tax dollars and our income and our blood, sweat, and tears. They're doing it out and proud right now. The corruption from this regime is just incredibly overt. Donald Trump is pardoning CEOs who have bilked billions of dollars out of the American economy through various scams and grifts. He's given big, fat government contracts to all his buddies. Corporations are buying favor from the regime. Ooh, how do I settle this lawsuit and pay Donald Trump $15 million here so that I get my merger over here? Oh, what if I cancel Jimmy Kimmel over here and then Donald Trump will push forward my merger over here? Oh, what if I just like make a donation to the new White House ballroom or to Donald Trump's whatever party he's throwing? What if I just like grease those palms a little bit? All of that's totally fine in the United States. And to me, I think that the level of corruption horrifies people. But to me, that's just the logical conclusion of late stage capitalism. That's just the final boss that we're fighting right now. It totally makes sense. An entire system built on exploitation of people in the planet. Why not weaponize the government to do that? Like full tilt. Seems like the logical progression to me. Right, we are exploited. The planet is being destroyed. Also, the super rich can hoard vast quantities of resources. It's wild. We are in the wealthiest nation on earth, and yet 47 million Americans experience food insecurity. Medical debt is the number one reason that people file for bankruptcy. The wealth gap in this country is greater than ever, and Oxfam is always updating us on the statistics. They put out this report back in November. The richest 1% in the US grabbed at least 987 times more wealth per household than the bottom 20% since 1989. In the past year, the wealth of the 10 richest US billionaires surged to $698 billion, and it has gone up in the last month. Between 1989 and 2022, the top 0.1% of US households gained $39.5 million each, and the top 1% of households gained $8.35 million each, while the bottom 20% of households gained less than $8,500. Between 1989 and 2022, the bottom 20% of Americans only increased their financial security by $8,500, while the wealthiest 0.1% almost $40 million. How about you? Have you scrimped and saved and pocketed $40 million in the last 30 years of your life? This report came out in early November, so it says 1 year on from the 2024 election of President Trump, new research from Oxfam shows how decades of intensifying inequality in the U.S. have culminated in a new American oligarchy, characterized by record levels of wealth concentration and outsized political power. Between 1989 and 2022, the poorest households in the top 1%, right, the folks in the bottom of the top 1%, gained 987 times more wealth than the richest households in the bottom 20%. Does that make sense? If you've barely reached the status of being a 1%er, you've still increased your wealth 987 times more than the wealthiest person in the bottom 20% of the working class. And in the last year, the 10 richest men in this country watched their assets reach the highest share on record. And it's not just the 10 richest men, all of the top 0.1% in this country have now the greatest share of wealth ever. 0.1% of the American population controls 12.6% of the wealth. If you're watching this on YouTube, I will link to Oxfam's full report. It's called Unequal: The Rise of the New American Oligarchy and the Agenda We Need. It breaks down all of the Federal Reserve wealth data and shows this trend that has created this incredible divide in this country, this massive wealth gap. And the foreword is by Senator Elizabeth Warren. She says in that foreword, "Today, a minimum wage job won't keep a mother and baby out of poverty. It won't pay rent on a 2-bedroom apartment anywhere in this country." She goes on to say, "After World War II, we built an economy where workers shared in the bounty they helped create." That's really sort of the American dream, right? The vision for this country is that if you work hard, you can benefit from your own labor. You can share in the bounty that you helped create. But then we changed course somewhere. The result, Senator Warren goes on to say, is an economy that works great for those at the very top and leaves everyone else hanging on by their fingernails. The wealth of working and middle-class families has barely grown in more than 30 years. The gains have all been at the very top, and that's disproportionately wealthy white men. The share of the national income of the top 1% has doubled in the last 30 years, while the share of wealth going to the bottom third in this country has decreased by 50%. Today, the richest 1% now control 50% of the American stock market, and the bottom half of the country owns less than 1.1% of the stock market. In the United States, the wealthiest nation on earth, 49% of our children are considered poor or low income. And it's getting worse. It's getting worse under Donald Trump. It will continue to get worse, which is why I will continue to proudly, boldly proclaim, I don't give a shit what the NSPM 7 memo says. We need an America with earth care, people care, and fair share. We should not have 10 super wealthy men controlling the wealth of this nation while half of our children live in poverty, while Americans cannot afford basic necessities, much less little luxuries or any rest. That's not making America great again. That's not who we should be. We deserve so much better.